Hi, this is a quick demo of the visualization capabilities within JSON Studio. The visualization capabilities in JSON Studio are based on D3. And what I'll do is I'll just walk you through all the chart types, and then at the end, maybe I'll do a dashboard. The dashboard builder was added in JSON Studio version 5. It just allows you to combine existing graphs or reports into a single dashboard. So the first thing I'll do is I'm just going to pick some data set so that I can get some charting information. And I will pick I'll pick a security-oriented data set. So these are policy violations. So it's kind of like a log data. And I'll look, since there's 60 million of them, I'll pick the ones from the latest, say, hour. So I'll say where the timestamp is larger than, I'll pick this field, and then I'll say something like yesterday, and then let me run it. So this is the start of an aggregation pipeline, just to make sure I'm getting some data back. And now I'll do a grouping. And my grouping will be based on a few of these attributes. So I'll group by the database username and server IP and the server type, and maybe something in terms of the time, but maybe instead of just grouping on the timestamp, I'll group on which hour the event came in on. So I'll add a $hour to this, and I'll change the variable name to be hour. And then I'll add a count, and then maybe I'll compute the minimum of the timestamp and the maximum of the timestamp, and maybe I'll do one more thing just so I have one more number. I'll create an average of the minute that the event was in. So it'll be an average of $minute of this day. Okay, and let me just run it to make sure I'm getting some data back. Let's look at the data. So I have a few text fields, and I have a few numbers, and I have a few dates. So that should serve me well for building all kinds of charts. Let me call this thing, let me call this demo data 1. So I'm just giving a name to my pipeline, and I'll publish it and save it. And again, if I want to see what the pipeline code looks like this is the Mongo pipeline code. But really all I care about is creating a few visuals for this. And again, from a reporting standpoint, if I click on this button, then I get the report for this data. But again, what I care about right now is the visualization aspect. So let me go to draw chart. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go one chart at a time, and I'll show you what that looks like. So when I go into the visualization, it built a certain default graph for me based on the data, but I actually don't care about this. Instead, I want to just show you the different chart types. So I'll start right from the top. So in terms of the charting, the charts are divided up into families of charts, and each family, these are the goals that you see: line, bar, scatter, bubble, relationship. They all have similar structures, so everyone within a line has a similar structure in terms of what you would plot on the x-axis and what you would plot on the y-axis, but that could be different than, for example, what happens in the bar family. As an example, in the line family, the x-axis can be a number or a date, but in the bar, it has to be a text value. Okay. So lines are the simplest. A line, I need to give it at least an x-axis and a y-axis. So for example, the way that I build these graphs is I drag and drop from the left-hand pane, which are all the data sets that I have, and if I click on them, I'll be able to see what values exist for each one of these data sets. Okay, so I need at least an x-axis and a y-axis. So for example, if I want to plot the number of events by time, what I would do is I drag the time to the x-axis, and I drag the count to the y-axis, and I get the line for this. But you see there's one event all the way here at the top, so that skews everything for me. The line is not very nice. If I instead of the count, I put the hour, might be a little cleaner, at least in terms of the visual aspect. Although it's not surprising because, of course, it's not going to be linear if I'm plotting timestamp versus the hour. And I can have multiple series, so I can drag the count as a second series over here. And I have these buttons where I can turn on and off the different series, so show only this one, or show both of them, etc. So that's a simple one. That's just a line. I can rotate the time on the x-axis so it doesn't overlap each other. And the others in this family are similar. So for example, line with zoom is the same, but there's like at the bottom there's a control that allows me to zoom in to a certain window. So I can say something like, zoom in and show me only this section of time, and then the top area will show me whatever I'm zoomed into. So like when I change the window over here, it changes what is shown at the top. So for example, it allows me to take out this outlier over here, because you can see if I include this, I won't see anything on the orange one. But the minute, because there's one big orange one over here, but the minute that I take a window which doesn't include it, then suddenly I see, oh, I have some different values for the orange one. The other here are pretty much the same, except for the candlestick. Stacked area is the same, cumulative line, instead of the line showing like this, it'll show one after the other. So candlestick chart is a little different. Candlestick charts, or high-low, open-close charts, they are, usually they're seen when you plot stock prices, where you have a price for the open and a price for the close, etc., etc. So for example, if I took the x-axis here is always going to be a time x-axis, and then I have to give it the high, low, open, close. So for example, high would be, I don't have 4 different values, so I'm going to use the same ones. So high, low, open. I probably should have numbers for these things, but I don't. So I'm just going to use dates because they can be converted automatically to numbers. And so what I get are these candlesticks. Again, not surprising, it's linearly going up because I plotted the same time for the value as the x-axis. So for example, it means at this point on the 28th, the lowest value was this and the highest value was this. If I had different values for the high-low versus the open-close, you get a box plot, so it would be a thick over here and a thin protruding from the box, and the color is determined based on whether the open and close value, if the close value is higher than the open value, it'll show up as green. If it's the reverse, it'll show up as red. And then the last one in this family is the histogram. Histogram just takes one data series, and it just gives you the distribution of this. So for example, if I picked count and I put it on the number, I'd get the histogram which again is very skewed because of that one value that's all the way here at the top, like this one. So everything else really drops over here. If I took like hour, probably would get a better distribution because the hour, as you can see, it's mostly close to the end of the day or the beginning of the day, which is what the histogram shows. Next family is the bar family, and those are the ones that probably most people know best. So for example, on the x-axis, I put one of my attributes, and then on the y-axis, I can put different numeric series. So for example, plotting the count versus the username, I get a bar like this. If I add it to this another data series, it would show up as a second column. So now I have two columns for everything, and I can turn one off and see only this one, or I can show both, or I can show only one. So take this off. And the same thing goes for the others in this family. So that's a bar. A column is similar. Right? It just looks this way. And again, if I took out this, let's see only one of the values. A pie only shows me one, the first series, right? This is the classic pie chart. Same thing with a donut. It's pretty much the same. A parallel plot takes multiple series and plots them next to each other. So for example, I have the values for the count, and I have the values for the average, and each line represents one of my series. And if I added another line, for example, I took the hour and put it over here, it would add a third thing to my parallel plot. So each series appears here, and a line connects them. So it's helpful to show relationships or correlation between different things. And I can zoom in and show only certain values. So for example, if I move my mouse, it'll kind of highlight only the ones that I pick and kind of make the others less visible. So that's a parallel plot. You have a spider plot, which will plot them on different dimensions. In this case, it's not very different from one another, but if it was different, then you'd see different geometric shapes per data series. And then what else do you have here? The Scatterplot Matrix, which what it does is it plots each of the series against each other. So if there are 3 series, you'd get nine plots, because there's each of the variables can be plotted against the other variable. So that's a Scatterplot matrix. And that kind of is the last one in this family. The bubble plots or the scatter plots, what they do is, given an XY series, numeric or time-based series, they plot the items on that XY, and there's another variable which controls the bubble size. So for example, if I wanted to plot, say, min time versus max time on the X and Y axis, and the size will be represented by, say, the hour that things happen on. And then what I'll do is I'll take the server type as, or the server IP as the group, and the DB username as the name. So what I get is I get a bunch of bubbles. Okay, each bubble represents one of my data points. The X and Y axis in this case are the minimum and the maximum timestamp. The size of the bubble is the hour in which it happens. Normally it would be a count, but I'm trying to get away from that stupid anomaly that I have one item that's way too large, so everything else becomes negligible. So this is actually a very common and very useful one. And similar to that is the scatter timeline plot, okay, where what happens is it adds another dimension, which is a time dimension. Okay, so in this case, say that I drag the hour over here. Then what will happen is, you see the number that's changing over here? It animates, showing me the different chart as it's valid over time. Okay, and I can move my mouse over it and control which day I want to view it. So it kind of allows you to use time or any numeric series as another dimension that controls and gets viewed through an animation. So by the way, let me save this for a second, and I will G1 and publish it. Okay, and I will also publish the API to this because I'll use it a little later. So I can call this demo G1. And again, what I'm doing now is I'm publishing so I can use it on a dashboard later in the demo. Okay, so let me keep going. So that was the animation. I'll just write it for myself so I don't forget what it's called. A bullet chart is in the same family, although it doesn't look like it's the same. It does have the same structure. So for example, if I wanted to plot, per username, so the name would be the title, and then I plot a value and a maximum or a minimum value. So for example, let me see, this is the hours are hours and the counts are bigger, and then I have this, which is the minutes. Okay, so for example, if I take this as the maximum, and I take this as the value that I want to plot, what I would get is a bullet chart for each one of these items. So for every database username, I get a plot of the current value and the maximum value, which I can define, and I can make this a constant, or I can make this part of my data set. So that's a bullet chart. And a gauge is similar, but it shows me the values as a gauge. So for each item in my data set, I'll get a gauge. So in this case, for every database user, I get a gauge with the value. Okay, so with the value, which in this case is the hour. So this is 16, this is 19, this is 20, etc., etc. The maximum is defined by this, and so that's how it determines where on the gauge it appears. So that's what a gauge is. And then the next family is completely different. It's a relationship. It's a relationship set of. It's a set of charts that represent relationships. So, for example, if I take say I take the username and say, okay, what's the relationship of the username to the server IP? Well, I didn't try it before, let's see. Okay, and say that I take the this as the size, and say that I take the server type, or something that changes a little bit. Say the so maybe I'll take the count as the group name and the minute as the size. Okay, just switching my data series. So what this gives me is kind of a hierarchical representation that defines based on a relationship, in this case, which usernames belong to which server IPs. The size of these boxes are whatever I put here in the size weight parameter, and the color is determined by the different values that I have, in this case, in count. Or I can put here anything, and it's a tree map, so like if I click here and I want to see what's going on in 9.70.147.187, I click this, it'll zoom in and show me only the values for this, and show me the different usernames that exist within this relationship, and I can zoom out, etc. So that's a tree map. Sunburst, it shows the same relationship, but in a circle, right? And again, the same notion of colors and ownership, etc. And I can zoom in and see, you know, show me everything within this server. Okay, so it'll zoom in and I can zoom back out. A core diagram plots all the data points on a circle. Okay, and then I can see, okay, this user, which servers did it go to, which servers did it come from. So that's a core diagram. A co-occurrence diagram plots the different values on an XY matrix, and then shows me which ones are tied to which. And then a heat map shows me a similar kind of thing, but you know, the colors are based on, or actually, let me switch these around. It'll be easier to see this way. So I'll move this to the from, and this to the to. There we go. Right, so now for each server, it shows me all the different users, and then the scaling, you know, is linear in terms of the number. So like this is the biggest number, and the greenest is the smallest number. So it's very useful for showing things like, you know, all kinds of systems and their behavior, if they're running hot or if they have too much load, things like that. So let me save this one as G2. And again, I save the graph. That's one thing I do, and then I publish it as an API. So I give it a name, and I always make sure that the publish checkbox is checked, because then it means that others can use my dashboard once I create it. And then, so that's the heat map. A multi-donut, it creates a donut for every item, in this case in my server IP. And for each server IP, it gives me a breakdown of all of the other dimension, which is the username. So you can see this server only has 2 users. This one is all over the place. Okay, so I'll save this one too. Or you know what? Maybe what I'll do is let's see, how many server IPs do I have? Maybe I'll switch it back. I'll switch it back to be server IP will be in the parent, and DB username will be the child. Just makes for a little better, more manageable data set, and I'll call this demo G3. And again, I go and I publish this as a new API. Great. Let's see what's next. A tree layout. Again, very similar data structure. So let me call this demo G4, and that'll be the last one that I'll create for the dashboard. Great. And then the last family that I have is a punch card. A punch card is kind of similar a little bit to a heat map, although it's really meant for time series only. So for example, I can say something like, you know, per server IP, so that's my name. I want to plot the I want to plot over time, so this time is what I pull to the time series, and then I plot some numeric value over here, and what I'll create is a punch card that shows me, per item, in this case my server IPs, over time, the bubble size is the whatever the value is. Okay, so that's a punch card. And so those are all the visualization types that you have in JSON Studio. Hopefully you can see it's pretty rich and you can do a lot with it. So now let me just do a really quick dashboard, and I won't spend too much time on making it pretty and nice. I'll just show you kind of a very basic dashboard. So the way that I do this is I go to dashboards, and when I create a new dashboard, so say I call this demo D. A dashboard is really something that lays out reports and charts in a certain way. So for example, I'll add a tab. I'll actually add 2 tabs. Okay, so call this one tab 2. Okay, and I'll call this one tab 1. Okay, and say that tab 1 will have a layout which is like this. And then at the top one, what I'll do is I'll put I think this was the donut one. Don't remember, but we'll see it. Okay, so I pick the APIs that I published. You can see that only 4 are there, even though I have a lot more charts here. I published 3 APIs. So I pick the API name. If I want, I can pick an API or a chart that somebody else published. So I have a whole bunch that somebody else published, but I can embed them within my dashboard. I can control things around the factor, like how big it is, how small it is, the height, how often it refreshes, things like that. But we'll call this, this was say demo 3, and I create it. So that's the one that will be at the top, and then the one that will be at the bottom, say will be my demo 4. Okay, and so this was demo 4. And okay, and then in tab 2, what I'll do is I'll make it this kind of layout, and I'll change the percentage so that it's like 50% to each side, and I'll put my demo 1 over here, and I'll put my demo 2 over here. Okay, and when I'm done, I'll save it. I'll publish it and save it. And normally there's more to this, which you can look in the documentation, because for example, I could have bind variables which control my my charts and visualizations and reports, and so you need to here you could edit the bind variables and create the set which the user could then use, etc. Okay, so now I'm going to log out because I'm finished building this thing, and I'm going to go and I want to just see what the result looks like for this dashboard. So I'm going to go and connect to the system. And I think I call this demo D. And I'll submit it and see if I got everything right. Okay, so indeed there are 2 tabs, and now it's building the charts for me. And when it's building it, it's actually running all the queries. And if you noticed at the beginning, the aggregation pipeline is based on a collection with 60 million documents. so it could take a bit of time. So I get my little charts over here on tab 1, and I get the ones on chart 2 as well, and everything is running. So hopefully you see how simple it is to build, a dashboard from scratch. And the last thing I'll leave you with is I'll run a dashboard that has been published through a web service. And this is actually a production dashboard, so it has quite a lot of visualizations in them combined together to, with more investment of time than the one we just built here. Yeah. So, so some gauges, some lines, or I can again, remove some of the data sets. And if I want to focus on, say, the purple one, I can remove all the other data sets, and it's all very interactive. So I can just focus in on the one that I want to view on. So this is the load I have on one of these systems, and then I have a set of violations. So I have a line with zoom showing me what's going on in a certain time frame, plus the heat map. Same thing for all the errors in the system. And then I can look at all the vulnerabilities that exist in the system using both a multi-donut and a bullet chart. I can look at outliers, again, broken down by server plus relationships. And then finally, I can view everything that's coming from the different sources with the ability to kind of go in and look at a certain period of time. So that's an example of a comprehensive dashboard combining something like 20 or 30 different visualizations into a single pane of glass. So thank you for joining. This was a very quick demo of the visualization capabilities in JSON Studio. Take a look at our other videos that we have online, and thanks.